Check. 1, 2. 1, 2. Check. 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 1, 2. Check. 1, 1, 2. Check.
Good morning and welcome back to Day 2 of the State of the Fijian Economy Dialogue 2026 by Dialogue Fiji. We acknowledge the presence of our keynote speaker from yesterday, Dr. Giovanni from IMF. Thank you, members of parliament, colleagues, stakeholders, as well as members of the private sector and public sector and diplomatic corps. Yesterday's discussions highlighted important issues around economic growth, debt sustainability, investment, employment, and resilience. Today, we turn our attention to national priorities, policy reform, and Fiji's future economic direction. Our third panel this morning that starts is on national priorities and Fiji's economic future. Our moderator for the session will be Mr. John Apted, and we have on the panel the Honorable Professor Biman Prasad, Honorable Manoa Kamikamida, Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry, Mr. Savanatha Narumba, and Mr. Ayaz Syed Qayyum. I would like to ask the moderator and the different panelists to please come in order of their names being announced to the stage. Thank you.
I'll sit here. Oh, no, they want me in the middle. They want me in the middle. Yeah. They want me in the middle, so you can sit here. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. I'm the moderator, John Apted. I'll confess, this is a new gig for me. I don't normally moderate economic panel discussions like this, so bear with me. Before I introduce our 5 distinguished speakers, I'll just go over house rules so everybody knows where we're at. The session objective, and this is relevant to the panelists, I remind you all, and the audience, is intended to provide participants, being you, with an opportunity to hear competing and complementary perspectives on Fiji's economic future from leading political and policy figures. And the context for today's discussion was starkly brought into focus yesterday by the report that the Reserve Bank governor shared with us, and I ask the panelists to speak to that. The discussion, panelists, and audience should focus on economic policy, governance, development priorities, fiscal management, social protection, economic resilience, and practical solutions to the challenges facing Fiji. And we remind everyone, the panelists and the participants, that this is not Parliament. It's a panel discussion. Personal comments should be avoided at all costs. We ask that commentary be kept at a policy level and not be personal. The session format today is that we have, instead of 6 speakers, we have 5. Honorable Chone Usamate called in this morning to say he's not available and can't come. So we will only have 5 speakers, each of whom has been allotted 12 minutes to speak, to answer the questions that are posed for them. We will then have 15 minutes of panel discussion and then audience questions. The key questions today are: what should be Fiji's highest economic priorities at this point in the country's development? How can Fiji balance economic growth, fiscal responsibility, and social protection in a period of rising economic pressure? And thirdly, what policy reforms and governance measures are needed to build a more prosperous, resilient, and inclusive Fiji? So with those 3 big questions, I now welcome our panelists. The first, to my right here, is Honorable Professor Biman Prasad, who's currently the leader of the National Federation Party, a position he's held since 2014. He is a government member of parliament at the moment, Most recently, Professor Prasad served as the DPM and Minister for Finance, Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics following the 2022 general elections. From 2014 to 2022, he was an opposition member of parliament. He is an accomplished academic and spent nearly 3 decades at the University of the South Pacific. Our second panelist is Honorable Manoa Kamikamida, who's currently a deputy party leader of the People's Alliance, a position he has held since 2022. He is a government member of parliament and chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. After successfully contesting the last elections, Honorable Kamikamida was a deputy prime minister and minister for trade, cooperatives, small and micro enterprises, and communications, a position he held until last year. Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry does not require any introduction. He is a founding member and is currently leader and general secretary of the Fiji Labour Party. He is the longest serving leader of the Labour Party in a political career spanning 4 decades. He built his public career as a trade unionist before moving to politics and served as the general secretary of the Fiji Public Service Association for some 30 years, in which I dealt with him professionally. And he was the assistant national secretary of the Fiji Trade Unions Congress. He is currently general secretary of the National Farmers Union. And notably, Mr. Chaudhry was our first Indo-Fijian Prime Minister of Fiji, following Labour's victory in the 1999 general elections, and he served in that position until May 2000. Mr. Save Narumbe is the leader of the Unity Fiji Party, and he has held that position since 2017. He brings the expertise of being former governor of the Reserve Bank from 2000 to 2009, and before becoming governor, Mr. Narumbe served as permanent secretary for finance for 4 years, and prior to that, he worked at the World Bank and the IMF in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. Last but not least, Mr. Ayaz Sayed Kayum. He currently serves as the principal at Kidmat Law. He was formerly the Attorney General and Minister for Justice, Anti-Corruption, Public Enterprises, Communications, and Civil Aviation in the interim Bainimarama government from 2007 to 2014. Following the Fiji First Party's victory in 2014 general election, Mr. Syed Kayum was appointed AG and Minister for Economy and Civil Service, amongst other portfolios, and he served in that position until 2022. He also served as acting Prime Minister on several occasions. He's participating in this panel solely in his capacity as former Minister for Economy. So with those few words, before I begin, there will be time shown on the screen in front of you, gentlemen. And I ask you to keep time. There will be prompts from the floor as well. So with those few words, I ask you to put your hands together for the panel. Welcome them. And I ask Professor Prasad to begin.
Thank you, John, and acknowledge the fellow panelists, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to stick to the 3 very important questions. I was saying to Mr. Syed Kayum on the table, in respect of the order of the speakers, I said, it's like we are in Parliament, you're going to be the last speaker. So in terms of Fiji's priorities now and in the next 5 years, I think it rests on jobs, incomes, resilience, and fiscal stability. If I can mention very briefly, the National Development Plan and Vision 2050 lays this out very clearly. And for the first time, we have said quite clearly in that vision statement where we want to go by 2050 as a country. And that is to reach a status of high-income country by 2050. But we also said this very clearly and carefully, that we won't get there with business as usual. And I think this has also been said by our international friends, the IMF, World Bank, and everyone else. So in the long term, we have to continue strengthening the tourism industry because that is one industry that we will continue to have a comparative advantage in terms of our location, our tourism infrastructure, environment, etc. But we must also, and perhaps we haven't done this very well in the past, continue to diversify our economy into agriculture, fisheries, manufacturing, high-value exports. But for all that, we also need stronger infrastructure, better housing, health and education, and serious action on climate resilience. We commissioned a World Bank report in particular on health, and there are a number of projects that the government is now pursuing, including a new national hospital. But let me also point out that you can have these plans, you can have this vision, you can have targets, but if you get hit by crisis, particularly global crisis, and this global fuel crisis, in my view, is by far the worst crisis that we probably will see, in terms of economic crisis, global financial crisis, rising out of fuel crisis. If you compare this with the 1970s, 80s, which triggered a global debt crisis, and many countries, our friends from IMF will remember this very well. The IMF was involved in bailing out many of those countries in the 70s, and particularly in the 80s. As well as the global financial crisis from 2008 to 2010, and some of you will remember that in July 2008, fuel prices reached about $145 US a barrel. If you convert that into today's price, it will be somewhere around $225. And Fiji suffered as a result of that. We had a serious inflationary crisis. In fact, we had a foreign exchange issue. Dollar was devalued in 2009. COVID crisis was slightly different, but the consequences were very similar. The difference between COVID and what we're going through now is many people during COVID lost jobs. And I think our priority right now is to ensure, as a country, that we keep the supply, we keep the economy running, we keep people in the job and in the stream of incomes that they have. Because if they lose jobs, they don't mind going into a supermarket and paying a little bit more, but if you don't have a job, that's a serious issue. And many people face that, many families face that during COVID. And this, of course, this crisis is going to put a lot of the reforms and policies off the rail and may delay the execution of some of those reforms. These crises, as we know, are fundamental shocks, but they also present fundamental challenges. And this global fuel crisis is really a shock in the short term, shock to affordability, and shock to livelihood. So in any discussion that we are going to have with respect to how we tackle this, what are the policies, we have to remember what this crisis is all about. The second question on balancing growth, fiscal responsibility, and social development, I think we can say this very safely that as a country we've had a history of bad fiscal management. And you can talk about this for the last 3 or 4 decades. And any government, and all governments faced this over the last 3 or 4 decades. Sometimes, we politicians, when in government, we focus on a lot of populist policies. Some call it vote buying policies. And that could add to the fiscal burden on the country. And I know there was a lot of discussion yesterday about the preparedness of the economy. Yes, we could debate that. We had this issue in 2018 and 19. In fact, in 2019, the economy had almost contracted substantially. We were hitting almost negative growth. And then when we got hit by the COVID, we had one of the highest contractions in our economy, about 17%. Then in 2021, 2022, we made that recovery. And obviously, we raked up debt as well, some before, some during COVID. And so when we came into government in 2022, and we did the first budget 2023-2024, we focused on fiscal responsibility, balancing growth, and social development. So we undertook various reforms, whether you call it tax reforms, and we were able to reduce the budget deficit from 7.2 in 2022 to 3.4, 2.5 subsequently. Lowering our debt to GDP ratio, yes, some people will say, we should talk about nominal debt. Yes, nominal debt is important. But if you're growing the economy and you're borrowing still to fund key infrastructure such as health, education, then it makes sense. But we were able to bring the debt to GDP ratio down from 91.8% in July 2022 to 79% in 2025. So, but these figures do not say to us clearly that our success is complete and that we substantially succeeded in stabilizing finances. I think that question remains. But it is fair to say that coming out of COVID and inheriting a fragile fiscal position, we did take some politically difficult revenue decisions. The IMF Article 4 supported some of the policy reforms that we undertook. We were able to grow revenue in the last 3 years, and the growth rate was above 3%. So that balance that we are talking about has to be achieved through discipline, but at the same time compassionate economic management as well. And so in the last 3 years, the government did take some policy measures to support our people. Whether you talk about back to school support, 170 million in the last 3 years to more than 200,000 students every year. Whether you talk about writing off the debt, $650 million for 53,000 families. So these are really some examples, and there are many as well. Critical reforms and investments, I think that question is an important one, and it remains the responsibility of any government, including this government, to ensure that we improve productivity. And I know there's a lot of discussion yesterday about productivity, about strengthening public institutions, making it easier to do business, reforming state-owned enterprises, supporting MSMEs. So these are obvious targets for critical reforms. And if I had time, I could list quite a few reforms that were undertaken before us. Some we continued, that was done by the previous government. Some we've been successful, some we haven't. But the important message that I want to give and conclude is that Fiji must grow, but it must grow sustainably. And I agree that we must have a stronger governance, economic institutions, sound financial management, and inclusive opportunities. I'll be happy to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Prasad, and congratulations on sticking to time. I'll now invite Honorable Manoa Kamikamida to make his presentation.
Thank you, John, and all protocols observed, and also acknowledge the panel here today. It's an honor to be here today to perhaps paint a picture of what's been happening, certainly from the government perspective, and perhaps in that story, if you like, try and address the three questions that were posed to the panel. And the first one being, what should be the highest economic priorities at this point in the country's development? When we got into office, one of the things that we were very clear about was the Fijian economy has always had a soft underbelly for some time. Tourism, we've been over-dependent on tourism as one of the main issues. And we have developed somewhat of a consumer-based economy, which does not really lend to productivity outside consumption, and which has driven a lot of people into the urban areas. So what we tried to do was, in essence, look at rebuilding the Fijian economy. And I will explain in very brief, as briefly as I can, what's been done so far. And I liken it to a duckling or a duck. When you see it on the surface, it looks calm and just floating serenely, but underneath it's paddling like hell. And that's been what this government's been doing for the last, if you don't believe it, I'm telling you, that's what we've been trying to do for the last couple of years. In terms of the main things that I would consider as priorities, two really. I had 5 when I got in, but I'll only talk to 2. Economic diversification and ease of doing business. On economic diversification, we felt that we needed to broaden out the economy. Some of the priorities that we saw immediately at the time was ICT, and we had a fledgling BPO sector at that point, commercial agriculture, commercial aquaculture, and then the value addition, re-looking at manufacturing, what we can do there, etc. Right now, Google is in Fiji. If you go to Natandola, they are building a data operations center in Natandola. What it means for Fiji is that it will open up Fiji to ICT business. It's happening right now as we speak. There are about 10 businesses that are already onboarded in the BPO sector as we speak. In terms of the foreign exchange, we are now easily surpassed 300 million in terms of foreign exchange. It's about 8,000 workers strong. The young people of Fiji, we know that our young people like IT. And so I see for Fiji's future, looking ahead, you will have a growing ICT sector. More BPOs, more cybersecurity firms basing themselves in Fiji. There are conversations already happening in this space, number one. Number two, commercial agriculture. What we did with commercial agriculture is, rather than try and dream up ideas, look at the local investors that are already investing in Fiji. And we found out, to great pleasure, some of us knew beforehand, Fiji Water is already in commercial agriculture. Aitken Spence, that runs the ports here, is in commercial agriculture, etc. So right now, as we speak, Fiji Water has about 70,000 plants of citrus sitting in Vanuatu in quarantine, ready to be deployed for experimental agriculture. I'm hoping that they can develop a serious citrus industry in Fiji. And then we can then roll that out and allow our rural communities to start planting. That's an example of what we are trying to do in agriculture. Aitken Spence, for those who don't know, Google Aitken Spence. They're a major agricultural company in Sri Lanka. They actually are willing to come to Fiji to do commercial agriculture. They have already identified land in Nandi and will be moving ahead. There's an Israeli company that is already on its way to Fiji. We're at the final stages of discussions with 2 big companies in Fiji, and hopefully they will start commercial agriculture as well. What I'm saying is, this is a serious endeavor to actually develop serious commercial agriculture in Fiji. Unless we do this, we will talk till the cows come home. And then what we can do is then link these private sector companies with the rural sector, cooperatives, etc. It's already, the models are already there. British American Tobacco is already doing it, as an example. Crest Chicken is already doing it for chicken, as well as rooster. So the models are already in place. In terms of the second question, how can Fiji balance economic growth, fiscal responsibility, and social protection? I think, to be honest, we have the benefit of history. And like Honorable Viman Prasad said, there has been a litany of overspending and abuse in past governments. And I can just give you one example. The film rebate that was done in Fiji, 400 million got spent from that film rebate. And it wasn't accounted for in the budget, but somehow that money got spent. So, these are the types, and that's a fiscal gap of 400 million already. So these are the things, and there are a lot more of these examples. So what we need to really do, and which the government is trying to do, is be disciplined in spending. And at the same time, manage the key variables that we need to manage. Debt to GDP, the OPEX to CAPEX mix of government, the revenue collections, are we overtaxing the economy? These are some of the ratios that are already there that we are seeing, and we need to manage. One of the things that we need to closely look at is the size of government. That's been, Honorable Prasad had touched on it last week or so in one of his interviews. Finally, in terms of policy reform, I've got 3 minutes. I thought I'd just touch on 2 real-life examples. One, in terms of policy change, we threw away MIDA. That has changed the dynamics of this country significantly in terms of people being able to speak, people being able to interact, private sector being more honest and more interactive in terms of what they're trying to do. So, that in itself has been a significant shift. And if you don't accept that, just have a look around you. The amount of noise that we have on social media, that's a result of what this government did. Secondly, mahogany. We have had this industry lying on our doorstep. It is $1 billion industry, and we have not been able to unlock it. You would have noticed at the last parliament sitting, we enacted the mahogany bill. That bill, I am hoping, seriously hoping, it will unlock the ability, the capacity, or the potential in mahogany. It is a $100 million industry. We just need to, now with a bill in place, there's a few private sector things that need to happen, and we can have a very potentially major industry within the next couple of years. So these are the types of building blocks that are there. Some of the things that I thought that I just share looking forward. History tells us that there's always a dislocation in the economy. And I'm just putting out there to everyone, Honorable Biman knows this, I've been talking about a sovereign wealth fund for Fiji. But nobody is listening yet. I hope people will listen. And we need that to cushion ourselves against this type of issues that are just happening now. If you talk to Philemon Wangambada of FDP, when he was PS, he managed to save within 3 years 160 million in 3 years. And he had stashed it in an account offshore, and then it was used. But if we are able to start seriously thinking about a sovereign wealth fund, we will be able to address these type of issues when they come up. We just had COVID, now we have the Iraq war. Who knows what will come up next, but guaranteed there is something waiting around the corner. In terms of sugar, I thought I'd just touch briefly on sugar. We assured that there is a parliamentary select committee looking at sugar. We know that we are wasting good money on sugar in terms of the amount of subsidies going in versus the return that's coming, and we need to rejig the sugar industry. The great thing about the sugar industry, before even government doing anything, the farmers are already moving. They're already diversifying. There's the New Valley farmers in the West. They're already doing cowpea planting and all sorts of other things. So like there is already a move to restructure the sugar industry. Government just needs to get there with the right policy settings in the right direction, and we will get there. Finally, the Tauke economy. I think for all of us in this room, we are missing out on a big opportunity in terms of the Tauke economy and how we can really harness it. In the Maori economy is now 120 billion. It is 20% of the New Zealand economy. And Fiji, if we continue down the road of the reforms that we're doing, we will be able to actually harness the Tauke economy a bit more. One example is just mahogany. Just imagine from a standing start of say 20 million a year, which is currently being exported, we can get to 100. The landowners get more money in their pockets, and we can empower them to do other things with their income. So these are some of the things that I thought I'd just share, and in the interest of time, I won't continue any further. But just be assured that whilst a lot of the public perhaps has not seen some of the things that are being done, be assured that there is a restructure of the economy going on right now to ensure that Fiji future-proofs itself in the next 10 to 15 years. Navale.
Thank you, Manoa. And I now invite Mr. Chaudhry to speak from the podium.
Thank you, John. Fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. I'm going to be speaking on governance, institutions, and economic confidence. The subject is state of the Fijian economy. Having heard the Governor of the Reserve Bank yesterday, I'm not very sure whether we have an economy left anymore. Nonetheless, I believe that unless we get our governance right, no amount of policy changes and fancy reports and studies will help us. I believe that bad governance has been the root cause of what we are facing today. The challenges we face, the poverty that we see, the unemployment that we see, I ascribe all this to the manner in which this country has been governed over the last maybe 20 years. Now, when I was initially invited to address this forum, I was invited to address on governance, institutions, and economic confidence, building a more prosperous, resilient, and inclusive Fiji. Now, at its core, ladies and gentlemen, governance is about integrity, accountability, and trust. It requires leaders to act consistently, tell the truth, and place the interests of the nation above personal ambition or political convenience. Unfortunately, Fiji has witnessed a steady erosion of these principles. Both the previous administration and the current coalition government have failed to comply with the rules of good governance. In their 22 general election campaign, the parties that now form government made clear commitments to the people. And why I say this is because in the Labour Party, we put the people before everybody else. So commitments you make to the people must be met. In the 22 election campaign, the parties that now form government made clear commitments to the people. They promised to reduce the cost of living, lower national debt, cut the size of cabinet, reduce the salaries and privileges of politicians, combat corruption, promote accountability and transparency in governance. Once elected, these promises quickly disappeared. VAT was increased and remained high for 2 years despite growing public hardship. Parliamentary salaries and allowances were increased while ordinary families struggled with rising food, fuel, and utility costs. Only now, in an election year, and after considerable public criticism, did government announce a cut in ministerial salaries. Many Fijians view this not as a responsible leadership, but as an act of political expediency. 13 years into 2013 Constitution, we are still waiting for constitutionally mandated legislations on code of conduct for holders of high public office, on freedom of information, on the establishment of a Transparency and Accountability Commission. These are constitutionally mandated legislation. The 2013 Constitution is now 13 years old. Why have these legislations not been enacted? Why? Do these governments want to condone corruption? That's why they are not putting this legislation into place? What is the reason? Can they explain? Good governance demands accountability. Instead, we have seen a pattern where legitimate criticism is met with personal attacks rather than serious engagement. That approach weakens democratic debate and does nothing to solve the problems confronting the nation. On public debt, fiscal responsibility remains another area of serious concern. Successive governments have normalized the practice of negotiating and signing on major loan agreements without seeking parliamentary approval. Parliament is effectively presented with a completed transaction and expected to endorse it after the fact. This is not acceptable. Public debt affects every citizen and future generations. High government borrowing and sovereign guarantees should require prior parliamentary approval before any commitment is made. This would strengthen transparency, improve oversight, and restore discipline to public finances. On state institutions, the independence of our state institutions must also be protected. Recent events have highlighted the dangers of political involvement in bodies that are meant to operate independently. Constitutional offices and oversight institutions cannot function effectively if they are perceived to be subject to political influence. In this regard, the current provisions relating to the appointment of independent constitutional officers as provided in the 2013 Constitution needs to be reviewed. The Fiji National Provident Fund and the Fiji Development Bank are pillars of national economy. Their primary responsibility is to safeguard the interests of members, depositors, and the wider economy. Yet, both institutions have faced increasing political pressure and questionable decision-making in recent times. They must be protected by strong legislative safeguards, governed by qualified professionals, and allowed to operate free from political influence. Their decisions should be driven by sound economics and long-term national development, not short-term political considerations. On energy security, the country's energy challenges are another example of poor strategic planning. Fuel prices remain volatile. Electricity costs continue to place pressure on households and businesses. Yet government's response has largely been reactive rather than proactive. Instead of waiting for shortages and cost pressures to emerge, It should have pursued long-term energy partnerships and supply arrangements well in advance. Strategic diplomacy must focus on securing national interests and ensuring energy security for the future. On the sugar industry presents an even more troubling picture. The forecast cane price for 2026 has fallen dramatically to around $57 per ton. For many growers, the economics simply no longer work. Input costs continue to rise while returns continue to fall. Many farmers are questioning whether it is worth harvesting at all. The industry remains one of the largest sources of livelihood in Fiji and directly or indirectly supports a substantial portion of our population. Its decline has serious social and economic consequences for the entire rural communities. The lack of meaningful reform and long-term planning in this sector is the failure of policy and leadership. For years now, we have been asking the government to call an all-industry conference to discuss the problems facing the sugar industry. There are numerous problems. Land is one of them. Access to land is a big problem in the industry, and generally for the whole of agriculture, it's a big problem. But these problems are not looked at. Land problems here are left to the TLTB. Government plays no role in it. Land is a national asset. We don't have a national land use policy. That is determined by TLTB because they administer 92% of all land in Fiji. We can't go on like that. There must be a national land use policy. Land is a national asset, and it must be managed in the interest of the nation. On healthcare, the state of healthcare equally is alarming. It continues to face chronic shortages of staff, equipment, and resources. Long waiting times, overstressed facilities, and continuing migration of experienced medical professionals have become commonplace. Ordinary citizens continue to bear the cost through reduced access to quality healthcare services. To add to it, sadly, we are now overwhelmed with mounting social problems, drugs, HIV, NCDs, human trafficking. And we, as I said, we are overwhelmed. It's a big problem, and I don't know whether the government has an answer to it. I think we're losing the fight against the drugs for reasons well known. On the civil service, a professional and apolitical civil service is essential to good governance. Public institutions cannot perform effectively when appointments are driven by loyalty, political loyalty, rather than capability. Too often, appointments appear to be influenced by political considerations rather than merit and competence. This has contributed to instability within the public service, with frequent investigations, suspensions, and administrative disruptions. Parliament itself is not immune from abuse. Procedural mechanisms intended for genuine emergencies are now routinely used to fast-track legislation with limited scrutiny and insufficient consultation. Standing Order 51. This undermines the role of Parliament as a check on executive power. Similarly, inquiries and investigations are frequently announced with considerable publicity, but rarely deliver meaningful outcomes or accountability. The cumulative impact of these failures is evident. The challenges facing Fiji is not a lack of potential. It's a failure of governance leading to low business confidence, subdued investment levels, continuing outmigration of skills, professionals, and labor force, erosion of public trust in state institutions. Finally, economic confidence cannot be built on political rhetoric. It requires credible institutions, sound policies, transparency in decision-making and leadership, prepared to confront difficult issues honestly. Fiji needs stronger institutions, greater accountability, responsible fiscal management, and practical policies that support productive sectors of the economy. The most daunting challenge we face today is to restore the faith and confidence of our people in Fiji's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. I now invite Mr. Narumbe to make his presentation.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the host for the invitation to talk to you this morning. We tend to talk too much in Fiji. We are playing musical chairs when Rome is burning. I asked the lady director of Dialogue Fiji, who is sharing the same table, what's going to happen to what we talk about the last 2 days. What's going to happen? She said, oh, we hope it will influence the budget. I hope it does much more than that. Much more than that. So we are talking a lot today. And we tend to be pushing our own ideas, our own agendas, protecting our track record. We do that a lot. And you have heard some of that this morning. I think it's a good time to talk of Article 4, IMF Article 4 report that just came out. It's quite revealing where we were or where we are. And yesterday, I missed a session. I think you have covered a lot of issues of where we are. Before we talk about priorities, we need to know where we are. We need to know exactly where we are. You may have a different point of view. I may have a different point of view. But there are independent reports that has come out stating where we are. And let's quickly look at that, because that will then give us the sense of urgency, the sense of action that I hope we can all share. The economy is going down. You may quote whatever reasons why it's going down, but the fact is it is going down. The cost of living is going up and will continue to go up. Article 4 says the debt is in close to distress. It'll get worse. Our real incomes of all our people are going south, really. And poverty, ultimately at the end, is deepening. So to me, we are at the most difficult, weakest position that we have found ourselves in the last 3 decades. And the thing is, it'll get worse before it gets better. You know? So what should we be talking about? To me, the topic of this morning in trying to identify the priorities, it's relevant. So I'll do that. I'll identify 3 immediate priorities and 1 medium-term one. The first one, and that's mine, you may have yours, we need to create that fiscal space. What do I mean by fiscal space? The fiscal space is the ability of government to maintain spending within the sustainability of its debt position. We have heard the debt position is going up to now close to 85% of GDP. So we need to create that fiscal space, because in such a situation as we find ourselves, government role is very important. Its hands are tied because it doesn't have fiscal space. It doesn't have money. So let's try to find out where government can create this fiscal space. I think it's inappropriate to be focusing on revenue. No, don't raise revenue at this time. You can look at compliance to that revenue. The thing we need to concentrate on is expenses. Okay? So go for expenses. I want cabinet reduced to 12 rather than 35. Okay? Parliamentarian salaries to go back to where it was, in 2022. Halve overseas travels, and including local travels. Reduce travel allowances. No new vehicles for a while. Stop this Constitution Review Commission, Electoral Commission, and so forth. Leave it to the next government. And I would like government to consider 15% across the board reduction in all non-essential spending. Priority 2, cushion the cost of living. I've been saying this a lot. The few issues on the cost of living, I know it's coming from abroad. We really do not have any control of that. But we can control the impact and how that impact is shared in the economy. The equitable burden sharing of this cost of living. At this time, as I said, the consumers are bearing all this. The consumers. We need a equitable burden sharing. And I know government can do this through the mechanism of its price control. Look at the margins that this price control items is. What about reducing custom duties on fuel? We have heard that. And perhaps increase duties on luxury items. It's a revenue neutral kind of policy. And I always raise this, we need to stabilize the value of our currency. That's the Fiji dollar. So far, we have depreciated by 4% during this year alone on Aussie dollar. I'm sure it's quite similar to the other major currencies. My third priority in the short term, and that's what Mahendra Chaudhary has emphasized, we must fight corruption. I'm using the word corruption, not good governance. Corruption. Why should we do this? You know? It diverts resources away from the poor to the rich. Corruption does it. It misuses taxpayers' funds. Efficiency of resource allocation is distorted, and it contributes to one of the biggest issues this country has ever faced, is drugs. How do we do that? To me, government must lead against corruption, explicitly, visibly lead it. The next one, and with due respect to the current police commissioner, I would think that we can explore appointing an expatriate police commissioner. And we must get experts from abroad who knows how to investigate corruption, who are not corrupt themselves. And we review the penalties by the court. We must get the community behind corruption, anti-corruption. We must. And I'm thinking in particular about the GCC. Those are my immediate short-term priorities. One medium-term priority to end my presentation is economic diversification. That's what Honorable Kamkamida has mentioned. Because to me, the major issue faced by families across the communities, we don't have enough money. That is causing a lot of issues. It has its ramifications down the community in drugs, in school dropouts, in family breakdown and crime. So where do we start? We have come through 56 years since independence. What have we learned in that 56 years? What have we learned? We must learn something from the past. If not, we will recommit the mistakes of the past. So I note Honorable Kamkamida saying a lot of industries are coming up. But to me, our diversification opportunities lies in what we already have. And what's that? Our natural resources. Our natural resources. You look at all the graphs of natural resources in Fiji in the last 20 years, they're going south. All of them. So that's one of the things about it. Focus on natural resources. Stop repeating the mistakes of the past. And this is really not a business as usual kind of thing. This is transformative. We must transform in this. And one of the things I would like to transform is the mindsets of people. Nobody's talking about that. But that to me is the major, major issues. So let me summarize my 3 immediate priorities: create fiscal space, equitable sharing of the rise in the cost of living, stop corruption, and in the medium term, raise incomes through the development of our natural resources. Thank you.
You, Save. Now invite Mr. Said Qayyum to speak.
Bulavanaka, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, fellow panelists, the moderator. The questions that were on the list actually are quite, I think, was obviously based on the future. But for us to be able to, what we need to do immediately, because I think the situation is critical, is to be able to take a very quick stock of where we are and where we are coming from. You know, Bertrand Russell, one of the 19th century English philosophers, he said that a genius with a brilliant idea at the wrong time is considered a madman. But an ordinary person with the same idea at the right time is considered a genius. And I think what has happened in the past 3-4 years, we've stopped becoming an ordinary person, in many ways than one. To understand what we need to do immediately, and I agree with, in particular, some of the comments made by Mahendra Chaudhary and Savinatha Narumbe in some of the areas. Let me put into perspective. Currently, our deficit is over 6% or 6%. We had I've got the figures here, and I think the governor of the Reserve Bank spoke about this also. To put into perspective, in 2022, the total budget spend by government was $3.7 billion. Today, the total budget spend is $4.8 billion, an increase of about $1.1 billion. And mind you, of the $4.8 billion, $3.9 billion is going on operating expenditure. In other words, the total operating expenditure of the current budget is more than the entire budget in 2022. So it goes to show where the priorities lie. The priority is actually on the operating expenditure side of things. And as and I don't want to take up too much time, some of the speakers have also mentioned about how there's been so much, wastage. There was talk about reducing wastage, but increasingly there's been enormous levels of wastage. The society, the country always looks for what we call common demarcators and looks at confidence building. When you have an entire political party, the largest political party, having every single member of its parliament being made ministers and assistant ministers, you tend to worry. The other 2 coalition partners, maybe you can agree because that was what was needed to entice them, for all of them to join the government. But it's not just about ministers' salaries. It's about all the ancillary stuff that comes along with it. The cars, the permanent secretaries, the secretaries, the traveling expenses, etc. The second thing, of course, is VAT was increased when it was not required to be increased. We came out of COVID. The growth rate in COVID was about 17%, 17.1%, I think. Now, that obviously is a high growth rate because on the back of the previous years, because the growth rate was very low, because of the fact the economy was closed. Then it went down to then it went up to 3% the following year. Now, we were able to repay our debts. Harry Punja is sitting at the back. He knows he's a businessman. That debt is not a bad thing if you're borrowing money for the right reasons. But if you are going to be borrowing money to spending a lot of a major portion of it, and now the the operating expenditure vis-a-vis the capital expenditure on the budget spend is something like 85-15 or 80-20. 80 or 20 or 85% being spent on operating budget. Balance is capital. The mix prior to that was 40 on 40 on capital, 40, 35. At one stage, went over 40. So again, it shows the priority. And we're seeing the unfortunate impact of that now, because as we know at the moment, the governor mentioned yesterday, we could actually be, and as highlighted by some of the panelists, we could actually be going into recession if what happens in Iran and Middle East, etc., continues. We don't have any control over that, but as I agree with some of the other speakers, they said we could have actually prepared ourselves. In fact, we had mentioned this in a post back in 2024, in October. Given what was happening in the geopolitical position in the Middle East, we needed to prepare ourselves for that then, not now as a reactive policy measure and saying, oh my God, this is what's happened, and try and shift all the blame on that. In fact, the writing was on the wall prior to that. So in a counter-cyclical measure, what government all needs to do is provide the stimulus. Government provides the spending to get the economy going. The same way with COVID, whether it was 360, whatever incentives that was given to businesses, etc., Savinathan and Arun highlighted this. There is limited fiscal space now because the lack of expenditure on the capital sector has meant there's not even a stimulus. We are a developing country. We need to spend money on development that will provide or increase productive capacity. And that has not happened. The size of the civil service was 34,000, approximately, the cadre, back in 2022. Today, it sits at 38,000. Our budget spend on paying civil service wages was about $1 billion. Today, it sits at $1.3 billion, an increase of about 30%. If you take the staff numbers from FRA, Water Authority, Fiji, and FRCS, you're looking at another 4,000. So you're looking at about 42,000 people who are now on the payroll. So, you see, all of this actually creates a situation where there's very little room for the government to maneuver itself. And that is a problem that we need to address. Now, how can that be addressed? I believe there needs to be some drastic measures that need to be taken, as was done in COVID. I mean, COVID, you cannot compare what is happening now with COVID. COVID is a 1 in a 100-year event. We've had, Noah Kamkamida talked about the agriculture sector. All the three companies he named are foreign companies. He mentioned an Israeli company, he mentioned a Sri Lankan company, he mentioned an American company. What about Fijian companies? Fiji Water got a 7-year corporate tax holiday. Why? So they could get tax credits back in USA. Probably making about, $40, $50 million in tax credits a year. Yes, water resource tax was increased. But why would you take away corporate tax from a foreign company that was very happily paying corporate taxes? They're making a profit about approximately $45 million a year. Why would you do that? Why would you give one single company in Colombo a 13-year tax holiday? For any business they engage in, they get a 13-year tax holiday. What about the Fijian businesses? What about the stimulus for them? The guy who repairs his, got a small shop, hiring 4 or 5 people now, doing tire repairs, whatever the case may be. The lady got 4 or 5 people doing tailoring. These small to medium enterprises provide the bulk of the workforce in Fiji. They are the ones who provide the wages. And of course now, when VAT was increased, which had an impact not only on consumers, but also on businesses too. So what we are seeing now in Fiji is a growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. Please don't take these things lightly. In 2023, those earning $270,000 or above got a 5% tax cut. The social responsibility levy was taken away. I'm highlighting these things because maybe it provides food for thought for those people who develop policies. Where are some of the areas that maybe they can rejig? We're talking about rejigging. Let's rejig these fundamental areas. Now, we need to, of course, in terms of being positive about, in terms of providing solutions, we always try to be positive because I think, unfortunately, and I agree completely with Savinada Narumbe, we have been spending so much money, time, and energy on things like Reconciliation Commission, the Constitutional Review Commission. Elections are supposed to be held by February. Why are we still funding these people? Why can't we use that money for something a lot more appropriate, a lot more decisive, a lot more targeted? We had talked about the national ID card. A lot of people had negative comments about that, in particular in Parliament. Now I understand this cabinet has said that RBF needs to progress with it. If we had a national ID card in place by now, government could have provided targeted assistance. And that's one of the challenges we faced. So for example, if you say we're going to provide $1,000 for all newborn babies, we need to have ID cards regarding the mothers. So that way you can provide targeted assistance. At the moment, I think government needs to, from a social equity perspective, because we need equity amongst, in particular, the marginalized in our country. That will provide some level of stimulus. The business sector, I believe in the past 3 years, if you look at what's been happening, if you look at the feedback, I understand there's about 1,000 work permit applications pending with immigration. Now, businesses in Fiji don't invite foreign workers just because they feel like it. They do that because there's no skill set, so there's a skill sets gap, or nobody wants to work in that sector. Mahendra Chaudhary knows this. 30, 40 years ago, you had people who were willing to go and cut cane. Now it's very hard for farmers to find physical labor to cut cane. It's been happening for a few years now. Government previously then had the prisoners. They paid them salaries and they went and cut cane. Government came up with a scheme. Let's have these cane harvesters. We provide 1/3, they take a loan, etc. We have to understand what is actually happening in the economy. What are the dynamics that are taking place? And I think there needs to be a stock take. It's not about a blame game. I think, with due respect to the first two speakers, what they need to do, in particular in government, and hopefully they can do this, because they are the ones who can influence budget, is they need to say, okay, this is the reality, guys, and this is where we are. Let's not try and think, okay, this is what we did. We launched a nice new book and a pamphlet, etc. This is where we are. What are the steps we need to take? In terms of the priority, I've got about 1 minute, 30 seconds left. In terms of the priorities, I think what we need to do is, as we said, cut back expenditure dramatically, operating expenditure dramatically. It may burn a few people, we need to do that. But prior to that, we need to provide targeted assistance to ordinary marginalized Fijians. I disagree with Manoa Kamkamida about saying there's an Itauke economy. No. The entire economy is affected by policy decisions. When the VAT was increased, Itauke people got affected by it. They were not buffered by it. So whenever you want to make national policies, you need to put national policies, look at various sectors, look at various areas. What are the potential? Land, of course, is an issue. They have a constitution that says landowners must be paid market rate. Let's stick to that. But provide the certainty, provide the longevity of tenure for land leases. You can never have commercial farming in Fiji if you have land leases only up to 30 years. No commercial bank will touch them. That's been one of the fundamental issues. So I just want to provide those 3-4 key areas that we need to look at. My time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to say that every single panelist kept to time, so please give them all a round of applause. We have 15 minutes of panel discussion now, and so to open up the panel discussion, I'll do the predictable. I'll invite Biman and Manoa in turn to respond to our other panelists. I appreciate that neither of you are in the cabinet at the moment, but you were in the cabinet for a number of years, and your parties are in the governing coalition.
So let me just respond generally. I'm not going to get into specifics. I think we can go on and on about what we could do in terms of specific policies. But just to recap, when we, this is not about defending my record for the last 3 years, but we inherited a debt to GDP ratio, and there are good reasons why that went up during COVID. I'm not, discounting that. We had to take some decisive revenue policy decisions, because if you want to bring debt to GDP ratio down, you had to do that. So we had 3 rates of VAT, 0, 9, and 15. And we found that there was a lot of revenue leakage, close to $400 to $500 million. People were charging customers 15%, paying VAT 9%, charging 9%, paying 0. So we rationalized that. And we know the history of VAT. We had 15% VAT without any exemptions from 2011 to 2016. Then we went to 9, then we went to 3 rates. So there was a rationalization there. And we managed to raise revenue in 2023, 2024, 2025. Until 2025, 3 consecutive years of more than 3% growth. What the governor of the Reserve Bank said yesterday is directly the result of what happened in the last five months. And that's the impact of the global fuel crisis. Now, what we did in the 2024-2025 budget, it was termed as an expansionary budget. And there are a number of policy that were implemented to prepare people, for a crisis like this. So minimum wages went up. There were a lot of, social policies, funding that went there. And so when we got hit by this crisis, people had a space, a level of space, which allows them to take this through. But as I said, the important thing about this crisis is it's a very strong short-term shock. And the shock is about affordability, it's about livelihoods. And the question that we have to now as a government, and I think, Mr. Syed Qayyum and others were right, that what can we do in the next budget is to look at how the burden of this crisis can be shared. And that is what the policy in the budget ought to frame. So let's not be carried away by what happened in the past, what happened in the last 3 years. This is a crisis that has not been created by government. Of course, there was Israel-Palestinian war. There was some impact that we were able to see and predict. But nobody predicted this US-Iran war. And that is something that has put everything off the rail. But the point I want to make is the debt to GDP ratio was brought down in the last 3 years. It was 79% as of July 2025. It obviously will go up this year. That's understandable. And I agree that we could have managed our size of government, our size of the civil service, better than what we probably have done. And maybe, this is the time to relook at all that.
Thank you. Manon, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, look, the current situation that's happening in the Middle East, to me, it will resolve itself. There's a lot of pressure you can see in the interplay in the media. I believe that the situation will be sorted in the not too distant future. So for me, given what we inherited from the previous regime, it's been all about trying to build the economy of the future and trying to put in the building blocks now so that we create that future. Yes, I've talked about foreign companies stimulating commercial agriculture. Why? Because they have the experience and track record to do it, and also the capacity and the capital to actually invest. Very simple. And they're willing to do things. Fiji Water wanted to do commercial agriculture in Fiji in 2006. Just imagine if the Fiji government had taken them up on that offer. What would have happened right now? So, the strategy has always been, certainly from the government perspective, is to rebuild the economy. And like I said, I'm very confident. The BPO industry, keep watching it. If we play our cards right, it'll be $1 billion industry for Fiji. It'll be $1 billion industry for Fiji. We've got Google bringing in cables, and things will tick on. So my advice to everyone in this country, let us not panic. Yes, we've had a dislocation externally imposed on us, but the fundamentals in Fiji are very strong and the opportunities are very strong. Right now, as we speak, I know I'm normally accused of talking about the pipeline. Mr. Ram Bajakal is in the room and he can attest to how genuine the pipeline is. But it's now at 8 billion and still climbing. So let's not panic and start saying that the world's falling on us. It is not falling on us. There is massive opportunities in this country. I take exception to the comment on the Tauke economy. This is exactly the myopic thinking that has brought Fiji to where it is now. The Tauke economy needs to develop. And what I mean by that is the harvesting, the harnessing of the natural resources in this country to benefit the landowners of this country. The mahogany industry, for the last since the last regime was in place, they did absolutely nothing with it. They just sat on it. The Mahogany Council that apparently controlled the industry met only 3 times. What a load of injustice that was. So, what I'm saying to the people of Fiji is, let's not panic. The potential is good, the underlying indicators are good. Yes, there's pressure coming on because of the fuel crisis. Leave it to the Ministry of Finance, they will find the money, they will find the ways to make it palatable for the country. But let's all take a long-term view, roll up our sleeves, and keep on this journey. Because if we do, the future for Fiji is very, very bright. Minaka.
Thank you. Mr. Kayum, Syed Kayum, if I could ask you to comment on Mr. Chaudhry's central theme that governance and structural legal structures regarding governance have a role to play or have a role to play in our current challenges.
I think good governance has a role to play in any government or any situation. You must always have good governance. Can I just take 1 minute, please? I just want to talk about, Biman Prasad spoke about the debt to GDP ratio. The nominal figure of debt in Fiji since 2022 has gone up by $2 billion. By putting a VAT, which essentially the poor and the marginalized of this country bore the burden of, $600 million was raised through the VAT increase. But we have not seen if the rationale for putting a VAT was to reduce debt. Debt has in fact not increased. On the contrary, it has increased to $2 billion. And it goes back to the point of operational expenditure is out of control. And again, the point of Manoa Kamkamida, that all is hunky-dory, it's only because of this Iranian war. That's not true at all. We cannot be disingenuous about this. In the same way he's talking about, you changed the tune about the Itaukei economy. I'm looking at the big picture. There are many things that are done to assist the Itaukei people. His take on mahogany is very, very incorrect. Now, he talked about Fiji Water. Fiji Water, when it started off, had a 13-year tax holiday through the SVT days. And in 2000, and they were paying something like $600,000 as lease money to Yangara Pastoral. That went up. We brought in the water resource tax. They threatened to shut down. We said, you've got till 6 p.m. I remember quite specifically in Cabinet, if you don't pay the water resource tax, there are many people who are willing to actually take up the water plant. But then they started paying the water resource tax. I mean, Harry Punja knows about this. So the fact is, let's get the reality right. BPO sector, Manoa knows. We actually started funding the BPO council, $300,000 a year, whatever we gave them. That's when the growth took place. Open the IT sector, open the data processors. There was very few people, for example, in Fiji on Facebook prior to 2006, when the data prices came down, when FCCC became involved, the hogging went away by the IT companies. Let's open the pipeline valve. I think there's a valve in the way. And it was told that there was $1 billion worth of loans that are approved, but there's no drawdown. Goes back to my main point about building confidences. If people build confidences, what Mahendra Chaudhry is saying about governance, if people see that, the private sector then will be willing to step into the water. We have a situation though, in the next 6 months, there are going to be elections. Normally prior to elections, normally post-elections, the private sector in particular always hold back to see what are the policies like, what will happen in the future, and that's a challenge now.
Sorry, if I could just ask you to address my actual question, which was the structural conditions for good governance, which were raised by Mr. Chaudhry. The method of appointment of constitutional officers, the laws required by the Constitution that were not passed.
John, I think, obviously some of these matters are before the courts. I cannot specifically mention them, but overall, in terms of merit principle, completely agree. You need to have good governance. You need to follow the Constitution. I mean, one of the things that I was actually quite astounded by, within the first week of the new government coming in, they got rid of the Public Service Commission, most of them. The Constitution very, very clearly said, you cannot remove a PSC commissioner unless there's a tribunal. Yet people like Vishnu Mohan, who were contributing fantastically, they were all removed, told to resign overnight. So that's where the non-adherence started. And I think that's what Mr. Chaudhry is talking about, that we need to be able to stick to those very values and principles, and indeed the legal premises that's set down in the Constitution, because that gives confidence, but that creates transparency.
Mr. Chaudhry, and other panelists, if I could get your reaction to Mr. Narumbe's suggestion that the Fiji dollar should be stabilized as a solution to the current crisis.
I couldn't agree more. I think we've seen a steady depreciation of our dollar over the years, which has really contributed to the cost of living increases that we have seen over the years. I remember a time when one Fiji dollar would get you 2 New Zealand dollars. There was a time when one Fiji dollar was the equivalent of 1 US dollar. And over the years, and this, of course, there are many reasons for this. I think the coups had a lot to do with it, because every time we had a coup, there was a devaluation. And this cost us very dear. Nobody wants to talk about the coups, but it's a reality that these coups have set us back. And in my own estimation, we are today 4 decades behind in our development, where we should have been and where we are today. Had these coups not occurred, Fiji would have been well ahead of where it is today. So we need to stabilize, we need political stability, we need to get rid of the coup culture, we need to bring the races together, but unfortunately that's not happening. That's not happening. We have different interest groups pursuing their own interest rather than pursuing a national agenda. The thing is that we still haven't got a national agenda. And that's the most sad part about it, because we need to decide whether we want a multiracial country, whether we want equal citizenry, whether we want all the people of the country to be treated equally. We still have to make up our minds about that. There are forces in this country, powerful forces, who don't want that to happen, who are dragging it on their own way, who want to still see, or rather, who want to dominate. If you want to do that, then you will have what we are going through today. People are leaving in droves, going away because they don't see a future here.
Thank you.
Some of these things are very real, and we need to address those issues. What we see today is that we are importing labor from outside. Our people are leaving, and we have to bring in people from outside doing even menial jobs. Why is this happening? We've taken it for granted, it's okay, the employers want these people to come in, so we'll bring them in. But then why are our own people leaving? Why have they left?
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary.
We need to be addressing those issues.
Thank you. Mr. Prasad, would you like to, Professor Prasad, respond to the dollar issue?
Yeah, I know Mr. Narube has talked about revaluation of the dollar. I think that's a weird suggestion. I don't agree with it at all, and I see Mr. Chaudhary is also supporting that. I mean, I really don't think it makes sense to talk about revaluation of the dollar, because revaluation means, okay, you might benefit in the short term a little bit, you know, they're coming from the point of view of cost of living because we are importing. But that's a very short-term, very narrow-minded approach to addressing the issue of the currency. I think the key thing is we need to grow the economy, we need to increase our export competitiveness. If you revalue the dollar, you know, tourism is the leading sector in the economy as well. I mean, that could be affected. So I really think that's a very lazy kind of, you know, option or suggestion to just look at where the dollar is. I think the forces of supply and demand can be influenced in a way that would be helpful and provide stability in the long run. But just to pick up on one point, John, very quickly on the forecast price raised by Mr. Chaudhary. I mean, Mr. Chaudhary knows that forecast price is based on the global movements in the sugar prices, and forecast prices are always lower than what the government at the end of the day pays. And there's a minimum guaranteed price of $85. Government has said very clearly, and it was done by the previous government as well. They provided minimum guaranteed price of $85. In the last 2 years, farmers have had the highest cane price. In fact, last year it was $105. So I think we need to stop politicizing, you know, the whole issue and be honest about what the farmers are going to get. There has already been a top-up for the delivery payment, and we have suggested to government that it should be $10.56, not $7.56, so that the delivery payment could be much better before they start cane harvesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Manoa, would you like to just respond briefly?
Yeah, again, I think I keep hopping back to rolling up the sleeves and taking a long-term view on Fiji and trying to really build out a proper diversified economy. With due respect to Mr. Narumbe, tinkering with the foreign exchange won't get you much. You know, it only takes another dislocation in the global economy, and you're probably worse off. So what we need to do is really start creating the building blocks, and I've just mentioned some today. I can sit here for a couple of hours and bore you to death on what's being done to really build out a proper diversified economy, an economy that in the future will start increasing foreign flows into the country. I've talked about the BPO. Just imagine if we start receiving receipts of $1 billion in foreign currency from the BPO sector. That really strengthens the currency, underlying currency. If we start with this commercial agriculture, we start looking at an export posture as well as import replacement. That will strengthen the underlying currency. One of the biggest things that was not done in the last government, the green transition. We would not be worrying about this war in Iraq had we done renewable energy in the last 20 years. EFL has changed its board, it's changed its management. They are now very laser focused on renewable energy. So in the short to medium term, you will see the reduction in dependence on fuel. What will that do? Strengthen the underlying currency of the country. So what I'm saying is, let us not get panicked at this stage. There is a dislocation happening in the country, but let's be measured, let's be deliberate, and let's try and re-engineer an economy that ensures that in the next 20 years, we will have a totally different kind of economy in Fiji.
Thank you. Thank you. The last question, and this is a question for you, Mr. Narumbe. What is your comment on Mr. Chaudhry's suggestion that discriminatory practices are one of the reasons for the massive outflow of people from Fiji and skills?
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, I fully agree. I think it's about time that we think of us as a nation, one nation. And I think that should resonate. Gone are the past that we used to divide ethnicity, less tolerance in the economies and communities. We need to build together. And I fully support that. And I think we need to start working at that. It's not going to come naturally, but it must start at the political level. The political level. There must be political ethnic integration. It is not happening. I can vouch for that. But I think if we are going to go forward with a united nation as Fiji, I think we need to start to do that. And that's related to what Honorable Kamkamida mentioned of a itoke economy. I caution about thinking around that. That there is an itoke economy, then there is probably an Indo-Fijian economy, then there is a Chinese economy, and so forth. I think we need to start thinking of one economy. That's Fiji economy. And I think what happens in there, that there may be policies that affect the sectors that are dominated by a particular ethnic group, but so be it. It's not an ethical economy. It just happens that a lot more ethnic groups belong to that economy. I also, while I have the microphone, we can be optimistic. That's underlying nature. But I caution against over-optimism that nothing much needs to be done. We need to do something. Our fundamentals are not there. The IMF has told us that. The economic fundamentals are not there. We lack diversification. Our trade sector is struggling so much. So we need to start listing those fundamentals and start working diligently on that. Only after that, then we can, I believe, be more optimistic than what we are now. Thank you, Chairman.
Very, very quickly. The Constitution says we're all Fijians, and it's there in law. And that is obviously to get over the past sort of, division that we had, etc. But I think if you politicize these issues, then you actually create division. At the street level, at the grassroots level, people are integrating. People do talk to each other. People do speak each other's language. So let's not make something out of a big deal out of it. Those things do happen. You go to Vanuatu, we see people speaking in Fiji Hindi. Go to Nanroa, you see people Indo-Fiji speaking Itoke language, Nanroa dialect, whatever it is. Those things do happen. When we start politicizing it, when you had an electoral system that demarcated, since independence, people along ethnic groups. You classify it to one ethnic group. Many of the development partners here probably don't know that. You classify it to one ethnic group. Come election time, you need to vote for that person in that ethnic group of yours. This constitution says one person, one vote, one value. Even if you actually live in Vanuatu, I can choose somebody living in Nadi because his or her policy actually resonates with me. So these things are already in place. What we need to do, and what I was trying to say in the beginning, we need to focus on the economy, getting the fundamentals right, the fiscal policy right, and ensuring that we're able to not just provide private sector stimulus in the right way, remove the current bureaucracy. I mean, BIS Fiji that was launched is not going anywhere. The third and regulatory agencies, or whatever it was, 15, it still has not happening. And we also need to be able to, addressing what I also said by Mahendra Chaudhry, etc., it's not about just the social issues, it's about appointing people on merit. If you appoint people on merit, then those people who are working as professionals, whether in the government, whether in the private sector, they will want to stay within the system because they know they'll be rewarded for their hard work. That's the fundamental of what we're talking about. We need to ensure also that inclusiveness is not just simply some reconciliation commission. It's practiced every day. I saw a post yesterday where somebody showed it to me. They said, oh, they did an ethnic breakdown of the cabinet. And this person is an Itoke person saying they are now 95% of the entire cabinet are Itoke, but we are in a worse position. So what are these people doing? That should not matter. The ethnicity of the cabinet should not matter. It's the policies of the cabinet that should matter. Last point. Yeah. We talked about social media. We've seen politicians in this country not stand up for misinformation, whether it's selling kandavu to China or something else, Bangladesh is taken over, whatever it is, that happened in 2018, no politician stood up and said that. We have social media now where people openly, civil servants, are making racist comments, but nobody's actually addressing those issues. So you need to create that space, not try and bring forcibly people together, because it will happen naturally.
Thank you. All right, thank you everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now open to questions from the floor. Please put your hand up and somebody will come with a mic. Address your question either to a panelist or to the panel. Please. And please state your name.
Good morning to you all, sir. When listening to our...
please state your name before you begin.
Sorry, yes. My name is Caroline Fisher, and I'm here as a personal observer. In terms of what has been said from the speaker or panels, which is very important, which is the bad governance, integration, tell the truth, must be met, and pillars of governance. And the last one is troubling. So for that, sir, I just would like to, this question would like to go to Mr. Manoa. In terms of this, does the strategy plan that has been there for the governments on the previous one, which they have a time, like for example, from 2015 to 2050. And once there is a new government, does it still maintain that, or there's a new strategic plan to be in place? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I understand. The Fiji First had a strategic plan or a national development plan as well. And when we came in through the leadership of Honorable Biman Prasad, we looked at that plan and then overlaid it with what we actually thought we felt like where the country would head. And so, it's just normal. Any new leadership will come in with its own vision and direction. But insofar as where the current plan is, there was just launched 2 years ago. So we are at the very early stages of implementing the plan. What Fiji has to understand is we need to take a long-term view on this country, because if we do not, we will keep getting stuck when it comes to a dislocation in the fuel price, a dislocation, another COVID hits. We need to take a long-term view and then really restructure the whole economy to set it up for the future. And I've sort of mentioned some of the things that we're trying to do. In terms of the Tauke economy, I think the easiest way to say it is In New Zealand, they talk regularly about the Maori economy or the resource owner economy. There's nothing wrong with it. It is an economic play. This country will be more stable if we have the Tauke meaningfully participating in the mainstream economy. That is all I am saying. And the fundamentals are there. Think about this. TLTB receives 100 million in lease money a year. Right now, it is all consumed, virtually all of it. Just imagine if they start saving 20% of it. What that will do in terms of the economy itself of this country, and what the Tauke can then do in terms of developing the Tauke economy. Because that is very important, and that is why, to your question around the strategic plans, yes, a new government will typically come in, have a look at what's there. We've looked at what was with the Fiji First. There are some positive elements which we kept, but we also put in our view of Fiji, and we took a long-term view as well. And that's how it works. Huh?
Just very quickly, there's a very good question when you referred to how one government can transition into another government and keep some of the policies. In fact, the new National Development Plan, for the first time, it says very clearly where we want to go as a country. Vision 2050, we want to achieve a high status income, for the country. That's a very clear vision. But we have also, in the last 3 years, worked towards changing the practice of politics, which is answer to your other question, how you can continue. And we did this very well. I mean, I can tell you, there was a lot of misinformation, fear before the election that people will be removed, people will be sent somewhere else, people will be sacked. We didn't do that because we wanted to change the practice of politics with the media freedom. You look at the parliament, you look at the standing committees, you look at the way in which the opposition interacts with government ministers, with policies as well, policy formulation as well. So there is a whole change in the atmosphere in terms of the practice of politics. And I think, I know Ayaz wouldn't perhaps agree with everything that I'm saying, but the practice of politics is something that we wanted to change in this country, and I think we have been successful. Maybe not 100%, but that's what democracy is about. It's about one government coming in, the next government coming in, pursuing some of the policies that the previous government left. And when you talk about infrastructure, when you talk about large projects, it never is completed by one government. There is a successive period through which governments undertake that. Thank you. Sorry, John.
That's all right. I'll invite the other panelists to speak, but be short, please. Mr. Chaudhry first.
Thank you. Talking about plans, we've had development plans, and if all these development plans had succeeded, we would have been in utopia by now. So plan is one thing, but have they achieved their intended purpose? No. Why has poverty increased? Why do we have crumbling infrastructure in the country? Why are our roads in this condition? Why are we having constant water supply problems? Why are our medical facilities not improving? These are problems which have been there for 20, 25 years, more. Really. We're still struggling with that. So having plan is one thing. Whether it's working or not working is another. And I think we all know that these plans haven't worked because we haven't had good governments in this country. That's the long and short of it. So one should not place too much reliance on these plans. I think we need to be a working government good governance. We are sincere about serving the people and serving the nation. And that's what's lacking in this country. That's what's lacking. There's too much talk. There are a lot of insincere people saying one thing, doing another. There is no honesty in governance. That is the truth about it. I think we've got to get rid of these people in leadership, bring in new lot of people who are genuine and committed to Fiji and who love their country. Only then we will get somewhere.
You had your time.
Yeah, I did much better than you did in these 3 years. What have you given? Ask the people.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, I thought you said this is not parliament. It's turning out to be. Yeah, please focus on the issues. I would suggest, I'm not a fan of planning. We spend so much resources of putting this plan together. We go around the countries, we talk to everyone. I was invited to also come to the Ministry of Finance in the last planning, and what I asked them firstly, what is the rate of your execution of the last plan? And you know what? They didn't have any answer. That's it. Implementation, execution. Get a plan that is simple, very simple. And I think that will work for everybody.
Just very quickly, New Zealand, promise. Manoa uses New Zealand as an example. Let me put it into perspective. Indigenous experiences throughout the world is very, very different. In New Zealand, they had actually a Pākehā Maori war, Treaty of Waitangi. Today, less than 6% of the land in New Zealand is owned by the indigenous people. So they have a very different experience. They have the foreshore area, they have Treaty of Waitangi. That's why they talk in that context. In Fiji, one of the things that we had recognized was that 91% of all the land in Fiji Itoke owned. We needed to stimulate that thinking that holding on to land does not actually create economic prosperity. Yes, you may keep some for future generations. That's why government actually provided 100% funded development of Itoke lands. Any Itoke land unit that came to us, we actually funded development for them. There's a number of projects, Yandua, Saweni, Warimbitia. Unfortunately, the government canned that. It was 100% government funded. The idea was to provide 19-year leases. People would uptake the land. In the same way, then they would get the cream. Whereas previously, you had people who'd come along with $100,000, take 100 acres from a landowner, you say, Vinaka, $100,000, great money, but they'll go and sell one lot for $100,000. And they will make probably 100 lots from the subdivision. So the idea was that they get the cream themselves, and that is something that can immediately be done now. Not wait for it to get into some other business with their own expertise or don't have resources in. That's the resource they have. The point about development plans also is that, yes, development plans need to be executed, but very quickly, development plans can get disrupted. Development plans also need to be neutral and needs to be country focused, not a particular policy agenda. So for example, one of the plans was to have a 4-lane road between Nandi and Lautoka. That should have been executed. A lot of people travel between Nandi and Lautoka. Nosori and Suva has got a 4-lane road. That should have been done. The Nandi-Suva corridor through Viti Levu, opening up, people in Bukuya no longer have to go in a horse and a camel and what, not camel, but a horse and a donkey to get to the market. The ladies don't have to come and sleep on the footpaths. They can get to Nandi market, Suva market within half an hour. The land that's there can be leased by them, open up the potential. Those are the things that you need to do, and that's what we need to be focused on. However, it can get disrupted. If you have COVID, for example, if you have COVID, you actually cannot carry out with any capital projects because there's no money. If, for example, there's a fuel crisis, if this government had decided to do certain capital projects, which they've done very little of, if they decide to do that, they'll have to put that on hold. They have to reprioritize area. So NDPs need to be flexible enough, but it needs to be a generic plan which is for the benefit of everybody in economic development.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Another question.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Mosmi Bhim. I'm from Fiji National University, but this question is my own question. So we've heard that civil service, the size has increased drastically. Our operating expenditure has increased drastically. And in fact, that's what's increased our debt to a higher level as well. It has contributed. So what I want to ask is, well, we heard today from Mr. Ayaz Kayum is saying in 2022 the size of the civil service was 32,000. Currently it is 38,000. But I heard yesterday that now it is actually 42,000. I don't know which is the correct figure. Is it 38,000 currently the size of civil service, or is it 42,000? Maybe the media could clarify it with the civil service. But my question relates to the priorities that have historically been given to the Itoke people on which sectors they should concentrate it in terms of jobs, for example. And as far as the chief sector have been concerned, they've actually always encouraged Itoke to go into the service sectors, get civil service job, join the military, join the security sector, for example. And at the moment, our military size too, we've heard, has increased. Since the last government came into power, this government, before it used to be 3,500, we've been told now it is like more than 4,000, more than 4,500. And this does matter because it contributes to the operating expenditure. And it can also contribute to the risk of a higher risk of a future coup. And so the new report that came out of the Employers Federation, they came up with a list of skills we have a shortage in.
What is the question?
Yes. So the question is the list of skills that we have a shortage in Fiji, for example. I wanted to ask Honorable Kamida particularly, how can you encourage the Itoke to reprioritize or encourage them to change the mindset from the colonial times of focusing on the service sectors, the security sector? Instead, can they be encouraged to take more interest in those jobs, the skill shortage that we have, for which we now having to get laborers from overseas? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, look, I'll try and answer that question as best I can, but I think I have to be very careful because there seems to be a perception in the question that Tauke are focused on one profession or another. So we need to be careful there for pigeonholing. But I think I'll start with the first premise in your long question, which was the size of government. I've got a theory behind it, and the sad fact was when we got into government, nurses were underpaid, civil servants had not been paid since 2017, had not received an increase. So we were dealing with a lag of expenditure. And that had happened because things were suppressed. Let's be honest. There was no unions that could advocate. There was nothing of that sort. So you can have your turn later. The resourcing had to go in. Last year, I think we recruited 1,000 policemen. That's 1,000 for additional. Why? Crime, because of the crime issues, and of course the drug issues as well. So I'm keen for finance if they can break down the increments that were done. But can assure you, as far as I could see when I was in cabinet, they were actually due to genuine suppression of income. The prison, they had actually also had suffered the same issue. No increases for some time. So they did a job evaluation, and we had to absorb that. So now, at least we can say that a lot of in terms of the public sector, we have paid, within the budget capability, we have paid people what they deserve, as opposed to being repressive. In terms of the encouraging, to go into other professions, that is already happening already. And some of us, for example, in the accounting profession, for example, the Fiji Institute of Accountants, only the membership of Itoke is only 14%. You didn't know that, did you? So there is a concerted effort at the moment to increase that membership. Why? Because the members of that profession do have a large say in how the economy plays out. So these are some of the quiet initiatives, yes, that are happening. And in terms of the survey that you had mentioned, that survey came out of a discussion in Nandi 2 years ago. And it's the first actual genuine attempt to actually understand the labor shortage in this country. Before that, there has never been a study on skill shortage, ever. The first ever study was done by this government to try and understand where the shortages lie. What has that done? It has given clarity to the immigration department in terms of where the shortages are, and I'm hopeful to Mr. Qayyum's comments about the outstanding immigration permits. Hopefully that can accelerate because there's now a clear understanding, market evidence-based sort of research that shows where the shortages are. And hopefully then, I see Ramana Rokatundraketi is here in terms of the education posture. We can start looking at the education system and how they can assist in filling the gaps that have been identified within. I think there was 92 occupations, I think, that were identified that are shortages. So there are things that are happening in all those areas, and I hope I've answered your question to some extent.
Sorry, we will take 3 questions before the panel answers. So can we have 3 questions?
Thank you, John. Vijay Narayan from Fiji Village. My question is to Ayah Said Qayyum, Manua Kamikamida, and Professor Biman Prasad.
That's 3 questions.
No, 1 question for 3 to answer, specific answer. This is in relation to corruption and abuse of office. We had a constitution that came in 2013. For 9 years, Mr. Said Qayyum, Accountability and Transparency Commission, the Code of Conduct, and the Freedom of Information laws were not enacted. You were there for 9 years after the Constitution came in. Also, Mr. Kamikamida and Professor Prasad, you've been there since December 2022. Those 3 laws that are in the Constitution supposed to be enacted, still not enacted. We're talking about the economy, but if there's corruption and abuse of office and continuous acts such as this, we know where the wastage of our money, the taxpayers' money, will go. Why hasn't this been enacted?
Thank you. If I could just take another 2 questions so that the panelists can answer more than 1 question.
Ram Bajekal. I'm facing a bit of a contradiction here in terms of what I'm seeing, I'm hearing here, which is a lot of bashing of the past and the present, which is good if you're going to learn from history. But also in terms of what gloom and doom is being spoken about here, and what I see as one of the ground realities. If you go to Holiday Inn on a weekend or any day of the week, in the evening, you seldom even get a chair to sit on. Is that a sign of the disparity in income? Is it a sign of consumerism? Or is it just a sign of the fact that we are not really talking economy? If you look at the media, there's only talk of commissions, investigations, everything other than the economy. And what spurs business people is when you see stories of the economy, what's happening on the economy out there in front, there is also a fear of missing out, and you don't want to miss the wave if there's something happening. And it's very gloomy when you see everything that comes out, or a lot of what comes out from the government is non-business and non-economy related. So how are we going to change that? Because if we're looking at the state of the Fijian economy and looking at how we can change that, that is perhaps something that needs to change. So my question is perhaps to Professor Biman Prasad and to Mr. Narumbe about what am I seeing when I see the number of cars has not decreased, roll-on, roll-offs have not decreased. You go to Grace Road, Holiday Inn, they're full, but at the same time, the economy seems to be slowing down. And is there a dichotomy really? Thank you.
And one last question, if we could just... You have to remember the questions. It's 3 questions.
My question is referring to the national debt.
Your name, please, sir?
My name is Cholame Ulundole.
And you're here in your own right, or?
I'm here from Sadalpa.
Okay.
The national debt and also the GDP, the gross domestic product. And my question is aimed at all the panelists. My question is, if you are to be the Minister of Finance today or for a year, what would you do to reduce the national debt and boost the GDP? That's my question.
Thank you. So maybe we can begin with Mr. Said Qayyum. To answer the question from Vijay.
Oh, yes. The question by Vijay, I wish he was vociferous in many other things in the governance in the past 3 years. But the point is that the government previously enacted the FICAC Act. It ratified the United Nations Convention Against Corruption unreservedly. It also put itself up for the peer review program, which meant every year we had a review by a developing country and a developed country that came and assessed our compliance. We had, as you are correct, the Constitution talks about the Transparency Commission. You may recall that in fact we had tabled the bill. It was done in 2018. And it was tabled in 2018. The committee obviously took its time. And by the time it was still doing its work, the 2018 elections took place. So when a bill is being considered and Parliament then reconvenes after election, it lapses. So you have to reintroduce that into Parliament. And as you know, in 2019, towards the end, we had COVID. Now, we had also, as you know, enacted the Freedom of Information Act. Right to information, freedom of information. The Constitution actually is a provision, right to information, a right to correct information. Those provisions are already there. FICAC is there. Yes, of course, the Transparency Commission actually would have helped. Unfortunately, during COVID, we did not do that because there's no fiscal space also to do that. There are other areas that we are focused on. In 2022, we came out of COVID towards the end. So, of course, the government needs to introduce that particular bill. It brings about a new level of accountability. It extends also to board members. As for example, we've seen now currently board members, a lot of the board positions are occupied by people who are failed candidates of various political parties. And we see the competency levels. So that has a huge impact. But yeah, I mean, that's the historical fact behind that. And now, the ball lies in the current government's court to introduce that particular bill to give ability. Now, the Freedom of Information Act, and in fact, the organization that was going to implement that was going to be the Transparency Commission. So if I, for example, applied for a taxi permit and I did not get it under the Freedom of Information Act, I have a right to know as to how the decision was made or what steps were taken to arrive at the decision. And that obviously has to be administered by a particular body, not by the organization from which you're trying to get information from, but an independent body, which would have been the Transparency Commission. So that's why when the Transparency Commission is actually set up, then that particular law will come into play.
Do you want to answer the last question for Cholame as well? If you were Minister for Finance, what would you do?
Who?
Yeah. Now, if you were Minister for Finance today, what would you do?
What would I do?
On debt and GDP.
I would not have, if I was Minister of Finance the past 2 years, we would not be in this situation today. We would have had the fiscal space.
The question is for the future.
Okay, no, for the future, no, sorry, I'm being facetious, but as I've said to you, as I've said to you in my talk, I don't know if you were here or not, one of the major things we would do is cut back operating expenditure. You see, as I said, debt, when you borrow money for specific productive purposes or to react to a major crisis like COVID, is not a bad use of money, as long as you can do the repayment. And you have that level of fiscal space to be able to respond in the event of there being an unwarranted event. So I'll tell you, we had 12 cyclones in 13 years. We had the largest cyclone that hit landfall in the southern hemisphere, which was Cyclone Winston. It wiped off 1/3 of the value of our GDP in 36 hours. So we had to, for example, rebuild schools, all sorts of things, infrastructure. We spent over $500 million. Notwithstanding that, we still had the ability to do that. We, of course, borrowed money, and we had to react to it. There was, as Bhiman Prasad highlighted, in 2019, there was a downward trend in the growth. And of course, then COVID came around. But prior to that, there were 9 years of growth. So as a minister responsible for the economy, you need to have that fiscal space. You need to cut back. At the moment, I'd cut back expenditure. I would targeted spending to those who are on the margins of society. And when I say margins of society, I don't necessarily mean people who are just on social welfare. A person currently who is earning even $20,000 or $25,000, he or she may have their husband or wife and 3 or 4 kids. They're facing increased costs. Those people need to be looked after also. Thank God, we actually have an income tax threshold that anybody earning less than $30,000 does not pay tax. So there are various ways that government can look at addressing those issues, but that would be my 2 key priorities. Reduce expenditure drastically, take away some of the benefits given to some of these rich, wealthy companies, stimulate Fijian businesses, provide assistance to the marginalized, go and very greatly encourage our development partners to say this is the game plan for the next 3-4 years. We'll stick to it. We can put in laws in place to measure those benchmarks and then hopefully get some funding to get us out of this rut.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just quickly respond to Ram's question on the indicators of economic activity? Yeah, you can find that at Holiday Inn, but I urge you to go to the market. I urge you to go out to the streets, and that's when you will see the actual signals of economy. You can see poverty visibly over there, and that's where you will see some other competing different signs of the economy. On debt to GDP, yeah, they are related, but very different. Government is a big sector. As you have heard, 38,000 people work there. So it's a big move of the economy, and the spending on infrastructure and so forth moves the economy. But be careful, because if your revenue is not big enough, you're borrowing. And that's the borrowing aspect that we are talking about. How sustainable is your debt? It depends on how good your revenue would be. So that's the benchmark. On the other Vijay's question, it was not for me, but just to say, that's exactly what politicians do. They promise us a lot and they don't deliver.
Mr. Chari, do you want to respond to the last question? If you were Minister for Finance, what would you do today? A very brief answer, please.
I think it's been ably answered by Save, but I'll give you our record. I think Professor Prasad talked about you had your turn. Yes, I was only given 12 months, and in that 12 months, I posted a 9.6% economic growth. And brought down the cost of living, reduced telecommunication charges, reduced electricity tariff, asked the FEA those days to light up our streets at night without any cost to the local authorities. And we posted the highest revenue ever and lowest expenditure ever, operating expenditure. So our record speaks for itself. That's our 12-month record, unprecedented, unbeaten.
Thank you. Gentlemen, just very briefly, because we want to take one more question.
Sorry.
It's the three questions.
I think all three questions was addressed to me as well. So the first one, Vijay is right. I think we expected the Fiji First government to enact some of those legislations. Yes, we've been in government for the last 3 years. I can say that the bill is in Parliament, is before the committee, and the committee is working on it, and we are hoping that that will be enacted soon. The question on the indicators of the economy, I think it's an important question, one that needs to be also considered in the usual dialogue and criticism that we have of government policies and the economy. I think the point that Ram Bajkal's made was important. The conversation has to be about the economy as well, and he's right. We perhaps have not concentrated on talking about the positives in the economy and what could be done and what could not be done. So yes, I think the indicators are very important. But also, let me point out the last 3 budgets, if you look at the debt to GDP ratio, and this is a fact, and I think we all have to understand this, that the debt to GDP ratio was 91.8% when we came into government. And that's a very important indicator. That's an indicator that is used to measure debt sustainability, etc. And we undertook tax reforms, we undertook revenue reforms, we undertook policy reforms as well, and we were able to bring down the debt to GDP ratio while maintaining a lot of the expenditure that was needed for post-COVID, because people were still rebuilding their incomes, rebuilding their livelihoods, etc. Post-COVID, and it was not over when we came into government. So we had to continue with some of those policies and rebuild lives and affordability of people. But in the process, we were able to grow the economy, 3 consecutive years of growth, 3 consecutive years of lower deficit than what we had in 2023. Of course, this year the deficit is going to go up because of the crisis, and as the governor quite rightly pointed out yesterday, the growth rate is also going to be halved from 3 to 1.5%. So that's the situation, and I think we can't just talk about what has happened or what's happening now based on what happened in the last 3 years. So there's been a lot of thinking, a lot of work done towards addressing the whole issue of debt to GDP ratio. Just to quickly, I don't want to debate with Mr. Chaudhary, but in 1997 we had the constitutional passage of the 1997 Constitution. There was a lot of confidence in the country. The economy was very strongly growing in 1997, 1998. And when Mr. Chaudhary came in May 1999, the economy was already very, very strong and 9% growth. But he was also a Minister of Finance after the coup in 2006. And before after he left, there was a devaluation of 20%. So, as I said, the crisis and the coups and bad governance has a history in this country, and we can't cherry pick on what happened in a particular year, at a particular point in time. The issue is that we need to look ahead. We have a national development plan. We may not have got everything right. No government gets everything right, but there is a national development plan. There is an agenda there. there is a focus on what we can do, and that's what I think we should all concentrate on. Thank you.
Just very quickly, I know where Mr. Ulundole was coming from in terms of his question, and I will just emphasize this point. There is no silver bullet in terms of fixing the debt to GDP. You have to really take a long-term view, roll up our sleeves, and actually work hard as a country. There are a lot of issues in the country. This government has made a lot of steps to sorting them out, but there's still a lot to do. But like I said, from what I can see, that's why I'm always very optimistic. There is a lot of potential there. We just have to push hard and believe that whatever's happening now is just temporary, and we will be able to pick up soon enough. We've done it before. There's been various crises before, and we can do it again. And so, but there is no silver bullet. No finance minister can just come and clap their hands and you'll get your debt to GDP under control. It requires really a genuine concerted effort to restructure the economy, and that's what this government's doing.
Thank you. The three final questions.
Good morning, Mr. Apted.
Good morning, Ms. Malimali.
Barbara Malimali and Samuel Asavu, legal practitioners, here for our 10 CLE points. Apart from that, we do have an important question for all of you. Mr. Apted, you are here as a former supervisor of elections. I see members of the elections office here. Our question is this. I think we should have elections by February next year. So between now and February, we've been in the West for the last 3 weeks, and we noticed a lot of roadworks, bridges, roads, everything being fixed. Now, after the last elections in 2022, the joint report suggested that we go into sort of caretaker mode in terms of expenses, that the government goes through the Electoral Commission to say, okay, this is how much we're spending. Is it good, bad? Do we allow it? Do we not allow it? My question to the panelists is, with 8 months to go, should we be spending so much? And two, should we be taking our expenditures to the Electoral Commission to have a look at for the sake of transparency and corruption, because this is the time everyone's giving out fishing boats and cake cutting and salu-salu and all of that. We need to keep the government accountable. Bearing in mind it's a 3-member coalition, should we be taking all of these to the Electoral Commission to check before you spend? Samuel Asavu and Barbara Malimali, legal practitioners.
Who was that question to, Ms. Malimali?
Everybody up there.
Hi, I'm Rajan from USP, but this question is my personal question. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and I just follow up from the question from Sister Malimali. We can talk about what will happen in 20 years, we can talk about what happened 20 years ago, we can talk about everything, but some statistics. Yesterday from World Bank, there was a statistics that 19% of our youths are neither in education or in employment. What is the proposition for them today? I'm not worried about 20 years later. What is happening to them? In the media yesterday, I read there are doctors who are intense. They have no idea if they will be posted. What is the solution for them? What I want to know is, while we are all trying to create an investor-friendly environment for people to come abroad, what are we doing to stop the brain drain? Because every time a teacher, a spouse, a couple moves out, they take a couple of 100,000 money from their savings and FNPF and all those goes out. What are we doing to capture them? I want to know, as a young person, what is there for me today and 10 years down the line that I should put in my money here? And finally, to the current government, the two representatives of the current government, You have said you have done a lot, but why is the narrative amongst the common people now so harsh? Why do I keep hear these words, Indians go back to India? I didn't used to hear that before. What I'm saying, your ideas, your policies might be great on book. How practical are that? How is it affecting the mindset of the common people? And how is it affecting the trust amongst people? Vinaka.
Thank you. And one last question.
Yeah, no, that's a question. Oh, okay. Hello, my name is Riaz. I promised myself I'd observe only today, but this is not a question, this is a comment. I was allowed to make a comment. So if I'm not allowed to make a comment, I can sit down, it's no problem.
Make the comment.
Yeah, okay, cool, very good.
We practice free speech.
Yeah. That's what they say. That's what they say. This is a comment about what Biman Prasad had said earlier, and I think it needs some bit of correction. He said essentially that no one was victimized after the government was formed in December 2022, and that that no one was forced to do anything, no one was victimized. He's talking about government institutions and boards, etc. He's either very economical with the truth, or he's ignorant, because it did happen, and it does happen. In fact, I can count a couple of people in this room who were victims of the change of government, including myself. I was terminated without reason, and till today I don't have a reason. So and it was political. Everyone knows there was a witch hunt, etc., that happened, and it continued for a long time. In fact, one of the reasons I think why government lost track of the economy is because they were busy in the witch hunt. And the irony today is the people who took part in that witch hunt, including members of the present government, became victims of that witch hunt themselves, and two of them are sitting on the stage today. And you know very well who are part of that witch hunt, but you do not have the, I don't want to use the word guts, but I will, you don't have the guts to admit who actually did
Mr.
this.
Saidkum, if we could avoid personal comments.
This is very general, because I'm saying this is about the economy at the end of the day. We're talking about the economy, because there's so much concentration on all these political issues and the witch hunt and the victimization, which no one wants to admit or talk about now, because now the shoe's on the other foot, and the economy got ignored. And that's why one of the reasons why we are in the place that we are in at the moment.
Thank you. One last question.
Thank you, moderator. I'm Faye Wolatambu from the Family Pacific, which is a feminist media organization. I loved Mr. Chaudhry's comment when he said, get everybody out, get new leaders in. We've been doing a lot of training for women, and one of the things that we've been talking about is that when you have more women in leadership, they improve and they have stronger financial performance and profitability. They are better decision makers. They're inclusive, and they enhance finances. So my question is, why aren't there more women in Parliament? There's only 5 women currently, 9.1% and 29% in the permanent, as permanent secretary. So the question I'm asking the current government, what are they going to do to ensure that there are more women, considering that they are better decision makers and will help you? You'll notice that all of you are men, and you've been commenting on the state of the economy. So my challenge is, would you be able to make better policies so that more women can be part of your government, of your different political parties, so that maybe in the next year, if more women are in Parliament, we could revisit this and maybe challenge me back on whether we have contributed much to the state of the economy. Vinaka.
Faye, your question is directed to all panelists.
Yes, to the government and to all panelists, if they can. What are they going to do to ensure that women will be part of their lineup? Not just tokens, with all the difficulties that are happening. What can they do to ensure that women become part of their lineup?
Thank you. If I'll ask Mr. Chaudhry to respond first.
Thank you. I agree that there should be more women participation in Parliament. It's for the political parties to accept that and make sure that they have a threshold in terms of women participation and as candidates. So it's a matter that needs to be handled by the political parties themselves. I think there was a recommendation by the Electoral Commission reform.
Barbara was asking if her question was, at this time, should the Electoral Commission be monitoring?
Yes, there should definitely be more monitoring. I think the current government must be in the shape of a caretaker government, and their expenditure must be scrutinized. I think the Electoral Commission must play a role in this, because there is no doubt that we see instances of vote buying. Clearly, they're vote buying under the disguise of assisting the people. But the real intent behind that is to win their votes. So there has to be a scrutiny of that, and I think the Electoral Commission must play a proactive role in that. With regard to the question raised about the youth unemployment, this has been our problem for a long time. I think 19% is probably understated. I believe it is more than 19% of our youth who are unemployed or are not in any form of education institutions. With regard to the doctors who are awaiting posting, the interns in the various hospitals, there's no reason why they should be kept waiting to be posted to hospitals. In the past, going back to the colonial days, these doctors, after serving their internship, were guaranteed automatic employment. And we are short of doctors. People are crying out that there is a doctor shortage in the clinics and hospitals that they visit. So why is this not being attended to? These doctors should be employed. There is no reason why they should be begging the government to be placed on permanent employment.
Thank you. Mr. Narumbe?
Thank you. Very quickly. Youth, we understand the challenges around the youth, apart from the social challenges, is jobs. Just getting jobs. And the jobs means we grow the economy in all its potential. At the moment, the economy, as we all noted, is lower than 2% growth. When we want full employment, I think we'll be talking around 4 to 5% growth. So that's a big gap. So we need policies to promote more economic growth for youth. Education, of course, is also very important for youth. The incentives to be educated. I think that we need to look at some incentives to that. Women, yes, we all know that women have important roles to play, but there are more words than any actions in this space. I see a lot of seminars and workshops on women in politics, but hardly find any kind of indicators that that is actually happening. We welcome more participation from women, and we certainly look at various measures that we can help do that. On the last one, the accountability of political parties, absolutely. But the law is silent, Barbara. The law is silent. You know, it doesn't require accountability of government that is in place to tell whoever is an independent body to examine its policies. It's vote buying. We all know that. It's buying votes. And it's buying votes not with their money, our money. So I would welcome if there are any reforms to allow all political parties, particularly in government, to show us what they're spending their money on as far as buying votes and so forth. Thank you.
Okay. Just very quickly, just
be very brief, please.
Most of you raised the issue, you asked the question about why the numbers in civil service increased, and Mana responded by saying that we had to pay them more salary, but they are two different things. Increase in numbers, obviously, is the increase in actual numbers themselves. So the figures are 34,000, civil service 2022, 38,000 now, 4,000 on top of that with FRCS, Water Authority, Fiji, and Fiji Roads Authority. That's why it's 42,000 now. And now, there are two different things. And one of the things that Mano actually failed to address, I'll speak really fast, is that we actually had civil service reform where we targeted those with the skill sets highly required. So, for example, midwives were being paid very little money, but we have a shortage of midwives. So the salary structure for midwives was increased. Salary structure for specialist doctors increased. Some there was a lot of people in one particular level, their increase was a bit slower. But of course, after 2019, nobody had a pay rise. Now, in respect of the issue about caretaker government, what Barbara raised, definitely, I mean, I think there was the MOG report that talked about the caretaker period. We have now, Electoral Commission has declared this to be the campaign period. So essentially everything is now in a campaign mode. The issue here is this. There is going to be a budget that will be delivered. That's the right of the government to deliver a budget. We need to deliver a budget because our financial year ends on the 31st of July. So we need to have funding to carry us post 31 July. What the government does in that budget, you cannot necessarily stop. And that's one of the, obviously the tricks of the trade maybe, so to speak, where they may offer lollies and incentives to entice people. But as far as capital projects are concerned and various other things that are unbudgeted for, that are not necessarily in this particular budget period, that of course need to be looked at. You, when your term is FICIC, also I think got rid of somebody's complaint about them vote buying using their own money, where there are people who are giving groceries, etc. Those are the things that also takes place. But unfortunately, I think FICIC did not delve into that particular space. Now, the issue about saying everything is okay and we'll get over this period, I think is incorrect, because if everything was okay, we would not have a revised growth rate from 3% to 1.5% at the moment. That means that things are not okay if there's a revised growth rate. And of course, debt has increased, notwithstanding the fact that $600 million was raised through increased VAT. The VAT increased by 66%. It was reduced from 15% to 12.5%, which is less than actually 30%. So it increased by 66%, came down by less than 30%. It had absolutely no impact on the working class people in terms of pricing itself was concerned. Women in Parliament, if you looked at the 2014 elections, 16% of the members of Parliament, 16 or 18, I stand to be correct, 16 point something, was female MPs in Parliament. Highest ever in this country's history. Now, one of the reasons why that actually happened is because of the electoral system. The electoral system is what we call proportional representation. So, a political party, for example, wins, put in simple terms, wins 20% of the votes, they get 20% of the seats in Parliament. And as was highlighted, I think, by one of the speakers, it's then up to the political parties, because before it was very male-sphered. When you had single-member constituencies, you had, of course, you had ethnic voting too. So you had Ba Indian, Tailevu Fijian, all this kind of stuff. So generally, because we're patriarchy, the political parties, just to be on the safe side, because there is one member comes out from that particular constituency, they'll only put predominantly male candidates. Some, of course, did. I mean, Labour Party had a couple of Labour candidates who made it to Parliament, people like Lavinia Padarat, etc. But the electoral system, we actually have a proportional representation. It depends on the percentage of votes the party gets. Then the onus is on the party to field as many female candidates as possible. Of course, they need to be credible. I mean, nobody should be put as a candidate just because they come from a particular province or a particular gender, etc., etc. They need to be of credibility, because at the end of the day, winning an election, running an election, campaign election is far more easier than running a government. And when you run a government, you need to have credible people. You need to have good people who can give advice to the Prime Minister, good cabinet ministers who can think outside the box, who can do critical thinking, critical analysis. So you need the caliber of people who will actually go into Parliament to be the right people. So that's up to the political parties. Now, in respect to the last point was the youth unemployment, etc. Look, youth employment has to be addressed, but it cannot be addressed in a vacuum. The economy does need to grow. The economy does need to create jobs. That's why everybody here is talking about how the economy needs to do well. That creates more jobs. Of course, things like real free education works. We don't have real free education now. We actually have parents who have complained to us numerous times in the street saying, I now have to pay a building fund. I have to contribute walk-a-thon, whereas previously it was not allowed to free education. TEL stoppers In the true sense, it actually helps people. A lot of people got educated, even though they came from poor families, but they did well. If they got into, like, for example, we never gave toppers for people to become lawyers, because there are too many lawyers. And not necessarily all of them are very good. But the point is that they could get, if they want to become a lawyer, they can do TELS, Tertiary Education Loan Scheme. We then have to have very good mechanisms around it, because a lot of people, for example, they wanted to go overseas and work. We actually allowed that as long as they had a guarantor, because we had the future generation we need to pay for. Now, the other point I wanted to highlight in terms of creating jobs was, the doctor thing, the internship. Absolutely. What Mahen has said is absolutely, that needs to happen. But the point is, the government has to have the money. Maybe that's why they're slowing it down. In the same way, government announced there's going to be no more overtime, because there's not enough operating expenditure. It's probably going somewhere else. So those are the kind of pressure that that's being put on people working with the civil service. The issue about, last two points. The issue about going back to India, etc. Yes, we've seen a rise of that. And of course, that people, if they don't feel welcome, or in the same way somebody says, oh, we only must have people from one particular province. Let's not have a Nanranga people, only have the Dakonrove people. That is also happening a lot. People are now saying, those 5 people from Tailevu, 3 people from Kandavu, we must have some people from Ba now. That's also happening. So that is a very regressive way of thinking. Again, it goes back to merit-based appointments. Last point, talking about jobs. The Fijian government just withdrew from the World Bank on this carbon trading. Very, very terrible decision, and I know why they made that terrible decision. Because they have not complied with the World Bank requirements. We had a Climate Change Act, we had consultations internationally, domestically, village level, etc., for 2 years. The first thing they did, when this government came in, they got rid of it. And within that, actually, we had carbon trading. Landowners would have benefited. They would have kept the forest. At the moment, the value on the forest is nothing unless you cut it down. This way, they would have had value on the trees being planted on the ground. We have created eco parks. They would have made money through that way. But that's what creates also jobs. Young people would have been good. Take these people on tours, etc. They know about their own land. They know about their own environment, the biodiversity, etc. A lot of climate change finance opportunities, I think, have gone missing, which have actually created a lot of jobs for the youth people in this country.
Thank you. The audience have been very patient, so please be brief.
Well, after Ayaz speaks, you end up having more to say, I guess. But let me just pick up very quickly on what Barbara said. I think the issue is the parliament is not dissolved yet. In the previous constitutions, there was a provision for caretaker government. There is none in this one, not even in the electoral laws. The electoral laws have provisions which essentially has kicked in the campaign period. So there are campaign laws, there are provisions there that define, what the political parties and what people who want to be members of parliament need to keep in mind. So there are provisions that govern that. So I don't think government is in a caretaker mode, and it can only be, as a matter of principle, be in a caretaker mode after the parliament is dissolved. Just a very quick comment to Riaz. I know you must have gone through personally, but what I was saying, as far as we are concerned, we are looking at the practice of politics. Yes, there may be differences of opinion about, when, people were moved in or moved out as a new government. I can talk about my own ministries and the people who were there and the way in which we treated them and we respected them. Some of them are still there. But generally, as a matter of practice of politics, we wanted to change that. I think, as I said earlier, there's been a lot of change in that. There may be elements of change that some people are not happy. There may be instances of individuals that may have perceived their removal or reappointment, etc., with that kind of perception. So I take your point there. The issue about education, youth employment or youth unemployment, immigration, Rajan, I think you need to look at some of the statistics on immigration over the last 10, 15 or 30 years, but more particularly in the last 10, 15 years. The trend was always there. There's in fact, post-COVID, there's been global labor market restructuring. There's been a lot of movement of people. Australia, New Zealand, for example, they're looking for people everywhere. New Zealand last year lost about 140,000 people who left for other countries. So this is a global phenomenon, something that cannot be entirely blamed on a particular variable or particular government policy or particular situation in a country. But I do take your point. There is an element of conversation that puts off a certain percentage of people. But I always have this feeling that you have 20% extremists everywhere. I mean, you see what's happening in Australia, New Zealand, groups against other groups. There are ethnic issues happening. So my advice to a lot of people is that concentrate on that 80%. And Ayaz was right when he said, by and large, a large majority of the people in this country, I would put it to more than 80%, get on a daily basis. They interact. There is no element of hate and racism as we would like to believe. But I think the social media and the small minority that propagate this should not be allowed to derail what the large majority of the people in this country want. They want to have an inclusive society. They want to work together. They want to see this country progress. So that's a point that we need to keep in our mind, and it's for people like yourselves, academics to counter that and to talk about some of these issues that will help our people more broadly. On women participation in politics, a very important point. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I can tell you about my party. 40% of our members of parliament right now are women, 2 out of 5. But still, I agree that political parties need to look at this issue. One point, John, I want to make. I think I've experienced this in the last 3 elections. There are a lot of good people out there, a lot of people who could make good contribution in parliament, in government, in cabinet, do not want to contest elections. And part of the issue is about the nature of politics, the political environment, the issues that Riaz raised earlier. My view is that nobody should be subjected to abuse or victimization just because you are part of politics or you had been part of government before or part of politics before. And that environment, and I think it's to do with a lot of the laws that we have, and unfortunately we haven't been able to change some of those as a government, and I hope that will be changed. Particularly the Political Parties Act, the Electoral Act. These are very, very draconian pieces of legislation that can put off a lot of people getting into politics, and I think a lot of women also feel that the laws may be quite a big barrier to the entry into parliament. So we need to look at some of those. Just one last point. I didn't, response to Ayaz, I didn't say that we collected $600 million from VAT. I said, revenue, tax reform, you've forgotten, we also raised the company tax from 20 to 25%. We rationalized the VAT from 3 rates to 2 rates. We added additional item there from 21 to 22, prescribed free medicine. So, and that 600 to 700 additional revenue, as I said earlier, was all put out to support the most vulnerable groups. 170 million in the last 4 years has gone to back to school support, social welfare increases. People have forgotten about the minimum wage, salary increase for the civil servants between 10 to 23%. So these are areas where a lot of these increased revenue were directed to, and because we achieved economic growth in the last 3 years, we were able to, despite the increase in expenditure, bring down the debt to GDP ratio from 91.8% down to 79% in July in 2025. Yes, nominal debt has gone up. I agree, but you and I know that the measure of sustainability of debt situation in a country is measured with respect to debt to GDP.
Just very quickly, with regard to Ms. Malimali's comment around Electoral Commission oversight, the last thing we want is to slow down the rate with which, normal distributions for needs to the people of Fiji happen. So I'd imagine the Electoral Commission would be already overseeing the campaign period anyway, so they may well work within their current guidelines to just oversee what's happening. I would not advocate a separate approval line. It'll just delay things more. In terms of youth unemployment, it's certainly an issue that we're wrestling with. We had a colleague from the FNU here, and he said something that perturbed me. And he said that some of the youth at FNU just don't want to do the hard work in terms of study. So that in itself is an issue that needs to be dealt with. But I guess from the government perspective, we have been razor sharp in terms of trying to get the TVET up and running. You have very good programs currently underway to try and accelerate young men and women, make them ready for employment, particularly in terms of the technical skills, carpentry, joinery, plumbing, etc. So that's already in train. I'm hearing feedback that perhaps there should be a need for an apprenticeship scheme as well. There are iterations perhaps that the government will need to look at going forward. In terms of the issue around, for want of a better comment, racist comments that was raised as a concern, certainly I'm sure on this at this table there is absolutely no tolerance for those kind of comments, and you will not hear any of us advocate some of the stupid comments that happened on social media. My only suggestion is there is now a very good online safety commission. There's a very good cybersecurity unit within the police. Use it. Use it. Take these guys to court and get them prosecuted, because that's the only way we will get some people to learn that this country is all about inclusivity, about everybody living together as one people, and that's the way it should be. That's that as far as I'm concerned. In terms of women participation, my urging to those who advocate for women participation, let's see how far we can go. Is it adequate to just advocate within the parties, or do we need something more constitutionally prescribed? I'm just putting it out there as a challenge or as a comment. If there is a desire to actually have women's representation, there are certain models. I think Samoa has a women participation model. That's something that can be looked at. But certainly, given that the constitutional review is currently underway, I invite all of us that have a strong view about this particular issue. Don't keep silent, but certainly advocate for what you feel is right. From my perspective, it's a tragedy that there are not more women in parliament. I certainly, during the 22 election, advocated for some exceptional ladies to stand as candidates for People's Alliance, but unfortunately they didn't get the votes. I'll just say this generally: women need to advocate for women as well. That's something that's been discussed very broadly as well. And I won't say more than that, but the participation of women, I believe, is a very important issue. But we need to sort of just assess at which point do we need to have the intervention to try and guarantee a more inclusive representative parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, and thank you, audience. It's been a 3-hour marathon session. I thank you all. I thank the speakers for their time and for behaving. So please give them a round of applause. And I thank you guys for your patience. The speakers were very eloquent. I don't need to sum up what they say, save as to say, on the right, everybody's saying, telling us that there's problems, that government needs to cut spending, improve governance structures, look at youth employment and the like. And on the left, our representatives of the parties in government are saying, relax, tunga, things are being done, it's not as bad as it seems. The duck may look like it's floating, but it's kicking like hell beneath the water. So on that note, I thank you, and please put your hands together and thank our speakers. We have to take a photo. Photo.